And now Kasparov is being pointed out by the French team with their telestration, has a 3-against-2 majority on the left side of the board.
But, I mean, this is not significant at the moment at all. And in fact, very often it's the 4-3 majority on the king side, which is more important. So I don't think we should read too much into that at all.
Well, the critical thing normally is the D file, isn't it? Who controls the D file in these positions? And yeah, it's a way off, as you mentioned, Danny, from anything like that being
Now, normally, Black's, there you go, it has ended up on e7. That's the safest square where it's in front of a pawn. It's very well protected indeed. So the fact that the Black king is in the center shouldn't be a problem at all.
So now Kasparov, trained in thought. And it is so often that Kasparov gets absolutely nothing with the white pieces against Kramnik.
At first glance, this position looks completely equal. I don't see why Black should have any problems at all. For instance, his king in the centre of the board looks very well placed to me. It's securely protected by the pawn here on e6. And of course you want to have your king in the centre of the board. It covers important squares on the d file, for instance. The only thing that White has going for him here is this majority of pawns, this 3-2 majority of pawns on the queen side. See, Black just has 2 pawns there. But normally, this shouldn't be a decisive factor in White's favour. But it's amazing how Kasparov managed to build up pressure here. First of all, he played his rook to the d file, rook d1, and Kramnik responded by playing his rook to d8. Pretty normal stuff, just challenging rooks, and Kasparov exchanged immediately. Rook takes d8, knight takes d8. And now Kasparov played the pawn to a3. Well, with hindsight, I think Kramnik should have prevented the pawn advance, pawn to b4, by playing his pawn to a5. Now this is a slightly risky move because it weakens, for instance, the b5 square. But I think it's very important to try and hold up this advance pawn to b4. Instead of pawn to a5, he just continued developing with bishop d7. The pawn came forward to b4, and the bishop retreated to d6. Now Kasparov brought the bishop out to e3. Pawn came to h6. I think Kramnik was worried about a white knight coming to g5 and then possibly back into e4, attacking the bishop, which could be rather nasty. Kasparov played his rook to d1 on the open file, looking at the bishops here on d6 and d7. You never know, there might be some tactic against those bishops at some point. Kramnik responded by playing his rook to c8, but that rook does not look so effectively placed as the white rook, because it's just hitting the pawn on c4, which is securely protected by the bishop. Kasparov played the pawn to h3, just guarding against the knight coming to g4, so that's just restricting the possibilities of Black's pieces. And now Kramnik was reduced to playing the bishop to e8, just trying to clear these bishops off the d file. And Kasparov played the knight into d4. It looks very powerful indeed. Let's just compare the two positions. We can see that White's minor pieces, the bishops and knights, have a lot of freedom, a lot of possibilities. This white bishop, you never know, at some moment it might pop out to f3. Bishop on e3 looking good, and of course the knight's very well placed. Now compare these pieces with Black's. This knight has no really good square to go to. The d5 square is covered by the pawn on c4. The bishop on d6, blocked in by the pawn on b4. And the knight on d8, and the bishop on e8 looking pretty miserable. It's these pawns on c4 and b4 that are so powerful, restricting the mobility of Black's pieces. Kasparov has a clear advantage here, and it's not clear to me how Kramnik is going to unravel his position.
I mean, it would be lovely if he could bring his knight to c6 and bring his rook to d8. This is what he wants, to bring his rook over, and he's dropped his knight back to d7, so another piece
Oh.
ending up on the D line.
Okay, so the knight is covering that c5 square. That's very important because Kasparov can play something like knight e4 here, attacking the bishop on d6. I mean, this position looks ripe for some kind of tactic for white here.
And Kasparov is well aware of it. Kasparov, just staring down all sides of the board now, feeling that there are possibilities
wait a
for
second.
him.
I mean, there are either knight d5 or knight f5 check. Let's.
Well, that's a sharp line, sacrificing a knight suddenly.
Knight d5 check.
The only thing about knight
Pawn
d5
takes.
is maybe he doesn't have to take. Maybe he can just retreat into f8.
That's true. I mean, I'm not sure if it's on anyway. Of course, the knight can be taken. And knight f5 check. King up.
That would be quite dangerous, actually, to take. But yeah, maybe he can do it.
Very sharp indeed. But of course, after knight d5, you can play king f8.
Yeah, but in the meantime, Kasparov doesn't even need this kind of move. Kasparov, with such a big spatial advantage, he has a plethora of plans. He could do so many things. Knight to b3, knight to e4, c5. He can start thinking about c5 and bishop f3 on tap. I mean, he just has so many moves. And in the meantime, Kramnik's pieces just looking horrible in this little box back there. They are being squeezed, and Kasparov looking for the most precise way to continue. But in the meantime, Kramnik with 10-11 on his clock, and Kasparov ticking down now to 10-4-13 actually, before he's finally moved pawn to f4. Yet another idea preventing anything from going onto the e5 square.
Yeah, I mean, you can see Kasparov's line of pawns on the fourth rank, b4, c4, and f4. What they do is they cramp black's pieces. So you can see the bishop on d6 now has very little scope. The knight on d7 is blocked, can't go to e5 or c5. So Kasparov basically turning the screw here. He's gradually squeezing Kramnik's position.
And Kramnik dropping back to c7. Denny, it takes a lot of guts to play the black position the way Kramnik is playing it. I mean, Garry Kasparov is shaking his head as if to say, what are you doing?
Well, I think he's shaking his head as if to say, well, there must be a tactic here. It looks as though a move like knight f5 check should win something. But knight f5, pawn takes knight d5, where you can check the black king round, but it's still not winning material, but it's so close.
No doubt about it. And Kasparov now just dropping his knight back to b3, not bothering with all the crazy ideas, because he has a big positional advantage, and there's no reason.
It's huge.
There's no reason
huge.
to do anything fancy.
Yeah, and he now, because the bishop on c7 blocks the rook, he can now play bishop to f3, just looking at the b7 pawn as well.
The difference between the two
they're-
forces is just huge.
Wow, this is a dream position for white.
No question about it. Garry Kasparov on great speed chess form. He has been fabulous, absolutely fabulous throughout this event. He did win all his games. Granted, he won one game by default against Anand, but he did win all the other games, no draws. He was not spotty. And now, Danny, come to think of it, Kramnik had a very difficult match against Ivanchuk, managing finally to hold the blitz game, but he had a very difficult match against Ivanchuk also, and now f6 being played. So Kramnik's road here has not been spotless and smooth, and he's also expressed concern that he may not be at the top of his game, and he has to be at tip-top form in order to defeat Garry Kasparov.
Okay, so that gives the black king a square on f7. So these mate chances that white have, not quite so dangerous now. And yeah, as is being pointed out, illustration there, Kramnik actually might be able to move a piece onto the third rank.
Can you believe it?
Shocking.
Can you believe it?
Breakout.
It is very much like a hedgehog position. Frequently, a hedgehog position occurs where one side has a spatial advantage, but it's very difficult to get in as long as the other side stands. It is like that hedgehog, isn't it? It's that crouch position.
Yeah,
now,
but
granted, the coordination of black's
coordination's
pieces
not the same.
they don't resemble the typical hedgehog position. But if Kramnik can just sit tight, not create any more weaknesses than he has to, control this kind of squares he needs to control, just make sure he doesn't blunder anything, he could potentially get the opportunity to unravel his pieces. And it's easy for someone to overstep, particularly in a situation where your time is ticking down, and you can see Garry Kasparov closing in on the 8-minute mark. So that kind of tension with a guy who's defending tenaciously, you know, if I were playing Kasparov, I would have done something crazy already, and Kasparov would be all over me. Kramnik, he's going to stay cool. I mean, look at this guy. Cool. Okay, you got an advantage. I know you do. I'm not done. But what are you going to do? I'm not going to give you anything obvious.
Yeah.
I'm going to make you work for this.
I mean, this is Vladimir Kramnik's great strength. He is so cool under pressure. But this one, if he gets out of this, well, I tell you, that guy is really strong if he manages to squeeze out. Because this is a horrible position for Black.
Even if he gets killed, Danny, he's still really strong.
Yeah.
But I remember Judith Polgar made the statement. She said, you know, I lose all the time to this guy. She says, I feel like he will never fall for anything. And now Garry Kasparov playing C5. She says she feels like he's just so cool. She feels like she could never rattle him with any of her brilliant tactical ideas. Just every time she plays him, she just has a horrible score against him because he's so cool. Just like, all right, you do this, you do that. Don't worry, I'll figure something out.
Okay, so C5 has been played, expanding on the queen side. Now, I'm just wondering, this sets up lots of new possibilities for White. There's the little maneuver, knight back to D2, into C4, and then into the D6 square. That's one idea. Well, shock horror, Kramnik has brought a piece off the back rank. Knight has come to C6, cover some squares, and the bishop coming to F3 on this superb diagonal, looking at the B7 pawn. You can see just ring there in the telestration. So this is still extremely unpleasant.
It is unpleasant, but maybe, just maybe, Kramnik can get his knight off of D7, put it on B8, and then contest the D line. Now he's going to go after the D line right away and allow the shattering of his pawn structure with bishop takes C6. But this is the critical thing. We've been talking about that D line the whole game, and if rooks are exchanged, Kramnik's problems will be greatly eased. It's not, by any means, it's not done. It's all of a sudden, it's all wonderful because the shattering of the structure could be significant. But Danny, I'd say that if he could exchange rooks, he'd be a happy guy.
Well, yeah, he'd be much happier than he is at the moment. This is disgusting, but yeah,
it's that critical D5.
That is a slight improvement to Black's position, no doubt about it. So Kramnik fighting hard, and let's look at the clock times. Kasparov is under 6.5 minutes. Kramnik round about 7.5 minutes. So this is not going to be easy for Kasparov.
Not at all.
Can he keep control? That's the question. He has an advantage, but he might be letting it slip. But now he's advancing on the right side, H4. But, I mean...
That's a strange
okay,
move.
what he's trying to do is clamp down these pawns. He's preventing Kramnik moving forward with pawn to G5, which could actually be a little bit irritating positionally. But, you know, it's not that dynamic breakthrough that one would expect from this kind of position.
And the knight is going to be
looks at exchange.
And
well, Kramnik has got to be pleased with that.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. Exchanging rooks in this position is the kind of thing that Kramnik has been dreaming about.
And you saw Kasparov shaking his head there.
Yeah, that he just...
It's as though, you know, he knows that perhaps he should have made more of this.
Yeah, that move C5, I have my doubts about it.
Yeah.
That C5 move just
With hindsight, it looks...
all the
doesn't look so
fire
great.
out of White's possible advances, but...
Oh, now he can start exchanging. Can he move his bishop out?
Bishop out to C6, and that would relieve a lot of pressure. And suddenly, Kramnik is back in the fight. Vladimir Kramnik, a super strong player, and this guy is just so cool, and he just waited for his time, and now, with Kasparov making just a slip, it looks as if he's just back in the game, and now he's played a knight out, and Kasparov playing G3. Then these are not the kind of moves that we would
it's not the dynamic
be cheering about. And bishop to F7.
Okay, so Kramnik is fighting his way out. Now the knight dropping back to D2, so he's looking to hop in to the C4 square. And from there, it looks at b6 and d6.
Kramnik
so
hasn't-
he's not out of the woods yet. This is still very, very difficult for Kramnik, but his position has improved.
Kramnik has one final problem, I think, and once he solves this, then he's going to be okay. Is the problem of his knights, the way they're connected. The knight on d8 is a silly piece, and it sometimes I remember the phrase by Dvoretsky, the superfluous piece. H5 now attacking the bishop will have to move. But it's like this knight on d8 is an extra knight as they connect. If he could just exchange off a pair
Bishop
of knights, he'd be happy.
That's a great move. Bishop d3 stops white's knight coming in c4. And
Bishop e2 and
well, now
more
we've got more
exchanges.
exchanges with this.
This is just
Things are looking
look
up for
much brighter
Kramnik.
for Kramnik, much more close to a draw. This kind of play, and
Again,
Kramnik.
still not easy because Kasparov has this enormous space advantage on both sides of the board, but Kramnik is edging his way closer, and he didn't
he's
exchange.
avoided the exchange.
Well, I find that really surprising.
Yeah, he must have seen something, and it's a shocking thing to see this exchange not being done, and Kasparov taking advantage of the moment to bring his knight up into c4 and looking at the weak squares, and now bishop to g8, and it gets just
Okay, bishop
stranger and
g8. I
stranger.
know, he wanted to play his pawn to e5, but now that's not possible because of knight d5 check. But some strange maneuvers going on with this bishop. I didn't see why he shouldn't just exchange it.
Yeah,
Relieve some
no
pressure.
question. His bishop going to that square now. Kasparov bringing his bishop to the f3 square, and that knight on d8 is still being tortured. It needs to do something. He's trying to figure out how to get into the game, and he's moved his king over to defend the knight on c6. And you just have to think that there's some strange tactics possible.
Okay, I think he wants to play his knight back to e7, and then maybe into f5.
And then the other knight could come
after
to
knight
c6.
e7, the other knight comes to c6, then maybe knight d5. Well,
That would be
ease
great.
ease the pressure on his position.
No question about it. He solved that problem. That's the final piece to the puzzle. If he can get that knight
Well,
over the d8 square.
Yeah, he's not there yet, but
yeah,
that's his idea.
But it's right now.
He's fighting hard.
Kasparov knows it. Kasparov senses that danger. Well, he knew it long before I knew it. He knows that maneuver is going to be critical to this position, and he's going to have to be ready for it. And now he's played king e2, as if he is waiting, and knight e7 has been played.
Okay, so Kramnik wants to bring the knight on d8 to c6, but this knight on e7 has interesting possibilities. He could come to f5, but also
Or
to d5.
Oh, yes.
Blocking out the bishops.
This guy Kramnik is amazing
He's
the way he
fighting
fights back.
superbly.
I mean, tremendous fighter. He's done it time and time again. And Kasparov nervous now. King up to d3, and that knight on d8 could come to c6.
You know, you feel as though
And it has finally left the d8 square, Danny.
you feel as though Kasparov should have been trying to find some dynamic breakthrough, but you know he's not there.
No, and now it's Kramnik with the breakthrough.
Well,
e5.
Well, he's
And
going to seize the
boy,
initiative here.
Boy, that just changed the whole complexion of the game. Now suddenly Kramnik's pieces are a picture of
Okay,
harmony.
there's a trick. If white captures on e5, then bishop takes knight check. Knight takes, the knight would have come in
Would
and
have
fought
fought.
king and rook.
And so now
King
knight to
bishop.
b6 check has been played, trying to chase the king out of the position. But
Okay,
this
but
is a totally new position.
But
I mean,
you don't need to capture this. So
You
king
just move the
back.
king back.
Yeah,
He
there we
has
go.
moved the king.
And now there's a threat of the pawn takes pawn on f4.
The knight is
Like he
going
wants
back into the
d5.
d5 square, controlling the square. And that might be something progressive, that weakened d5
Well,
square.
just a moment. Can't I win a pawn if I capture on d5?
He has
Exactly. I
taken.
capture on d5, then I capture on f4. Can that be so bad for black?
He's captured again.
I just capture on
And
f4.
rip, and suddenly
Kramnik's won a pawn.
it's Kramnik who's
Okay,
up a pawn.
he's given up the bishops, but
But it's a pawn extra.
He-
Kramnik is up a pawn.
he ought to be able to hold this position. And look, even the pawns on the queen side might be weak.
Yeah.
If Kramnik can play bishop down to c1, attack the pawn on a3.
Oh man!
I think
Kramnik
Kramnik's
has
gonna
turned the
hold
whole
this.
game around.
This is an
with
extraordinary
excellent play,
performance.
and he's played. Kasparov
There
has
we go.
pushed his king in,
And now,
and now he's hesitating. He's hesitating. He might have blundered a pawn.
Kasparov grabbed the pawn.
Well, there's
He
no
shot-
doubt
he's
he's
gotta
touched
move-
the
he's
A
gotta
pawn and
move
he's
it.
shaking
He's
his
gotta
head. He's
move
got to
the
move it. What is
pawn.
he thinking about?
He's got to move
And
the
he's
pawn.
finally moved the
I think
pawn.
he offered a draw. I think he offered a draw. Now,
Well,
if
why
knight,
should-
if knight did he? I thought he muttered something. Maybe he
Maybe
did.
he did. He better have, because now he's in danger of losing this game.
Well, he's got 3.5 minutes left as well, and Kramnik 4.5 minutes.
Or Kramnik could rip the pawn off the board. There's some indecision on
No, knight
Kramnik's
takes
part.
pawn, then bishop takes.
And he has taken the
So
pawn.
what's going on here?
And now the king has moved up to
C7.
c7. Kramnik, as far as bishop in the corner, it has been
but-
cornered, and now he's attacking.
Oh, this is very clever. So that now he can't move the bishop out. He must give the bishop away.
It's incredible. Bishop
Bishop
d5, f5 check could happen, Danny. Is that Is that possible? F5
Bishop,
check,
bishop
and
D5,
maybe he might
F5 check,
king up.
E5.
Bishop B2
Bishop
check,
B2.
king E6. Or
Well,
maybe
at the very least, it can be exchanged off the board.
F5
there we
check.
are.
Oh no, he can't play
Oh, no,
king
he
E5
wins
because
on
of
a
knight
bishop.
D3. He wins a bishop.
That's
Kasparov's
it.
about to lose a.
Okay,
What about
well,
king
king
D4?
King D4.
King D4 is forced. What is he thinking about? He has to play king D4.
Okay, is there another trick here? King D4, bishop B2 check, king C4. Well, at the very least, Kramnik is going to hold this game because he can exchange off that bishop.
Well, Kasparov has to be happy, and he's just leaning back, shaking his head. I don't understand what's going on.
Are we missing
something
some
obvious?
trick here?
What's happening?
Oh, he's taking it.
He's taking the
What
pawn on
about king
F5.
D4?
Why did he give away the piece? What was the matter? I'm totally stunned. What happened?
Well, Kasparov now a piece down, and I mean, he
just
could lose this position
easily, and he's totally flustered now. Cannot believe what has happened, and he's in danger of losing.
Knight coming back. Well,
And king
going
into
in with the
G6.
king, but there's no proper threat. King takes pawn, knight takes pawn check. Well, Kasparov is completely
He's just
lost,
down
but,
a piece.
but I didn't understand it. He
I'm
didn't
stunned
need to give
myself.
the piece
And now
away.
he's played bishop E5 check. The king is going to C6. He's
Now
taking
knight
on
takes
G7.
pawn check. That's the end of the game.
Knight takes pawn check. Maybe.
Oh,
maybe.
no,
king
then
G6.
King G6. He
King
holds-
G6 is possible. So
But still,
Kasparov
knight
trying to
D7.
fight, but now he's about to rip the pawn off.
Takes the pawn on C5. Takes the pawn on A4.
Oh,
That
he's
is the end of the
totally
game.
dead lost. Oh my goodness! What a
How Kramnik has got out of this. It's an
defensive
extraordinary
genius.
fight back. Brilliant play.
Incredible,
And
and
Kasparov,
Kasparov just
less
making
than
moves
2
now,
minutes.
and now he's about to lose his A pawn also, and he's just totally devastated. Look at him showing it. He cannot believe what he's done.
Well, Kramnik must still be a little bit careful. He has to watch out for bishop G7 takes H6, but no, this must be lost. Let's just, I think he can play knight takes pawn, bishop G7, knight comes across. No, he should be able to take.
Well, then again, there's some remote. Oh, that's so remote, though. Can it be possible to hold this position? Kramnik stopping and thinking about the
He's got the
possibility.
time left.
Maybe Kasparov now getting a little bit more.
He's played the knight
he's-
back to
he's
E6
avoided
instead
it.
to cover the G7 square. So it's still not over.
Kasparov now realizing that maybe he's got an opportunity to hold this game.
That's a clever move because now the knight prevents the bishop coming down to G7, but he's still got to grab the A pawn.
Yeah, the A pawn is going to go. What can he play now? He's got to bring his king back to
King-
attack the knight. It's
that's
the only
right.
move.
But then
No, he's played bishop check. The king is going into C4. And now
if
what
king
is it to do?
F5, is that the idea?
Well, king F5, it just looks like a check. And
But
Kramnik has
Kramnik's running short of... No, because
No, Kasparov is down
is
to
minute and a half.
131, and Kramnik at 258. And Kasparov sitting there now trying to compose himself, but shaking his head, and he knows this is a horrible position. Danny, I'm still confused as to why he couldn't play king d4. I'm sure there must have been something, or else he would have gone for it. There's no way he's just going to give up a piece. Could he have not seen this possibility? I mean, that'd be
Kasparov looks
incredible.
distraught. I mean,
What to
he's
do?
got to play it on.
He's got to make a move,
back.
king
He's attacked
f5.
the knight, so he's still got to target that pawn on h6, and this is not an easy position to
Knight
win
f4,
yet.
king to g4, now the king into b3, and that's going to be a pawn. He's played a5, still
Okay,
trying
now
to
He
defend.
attacks the pawn with the king.
And now bishop to d8, controlling that pawn.
It's still not simple to win this
Knight
position.
back, and now bishop to b6.
Now,
Nick is-
can he play bishop to d2?
Looks
take the
sensible.
pawn that way. No,
He's
he's
played
come
bishop
back
to g5, king into f5, knight to... Oh, and now he's going after the pawn. And
Now
now...
he wants to bring the knight back to take the pawn. That's a
Oh,
good move.
wow, what a move. And the king into
Oh, he can't
f5.
take the bishop yet.
And king first going
Oh,
after
but
the
now
bishop.
that's it. That's
and
a
now
great
the
move.
pawn is gone.
The bishop must move away, and then he takes
What
the a pawn. That must be the end. And
technique.
Kasparov 50 seconds.
What
and counting
technique,
down.
and he knows it's over, and Kramnik holding himself
resigned.
together, and he's resigned, and there's a magnificent game.
Performance from Kramnik.
Kramnik was incredible. Defensive genius, but we still have to solve the mystery of king d4.